Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 29th of October, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and my co-host today is Charles Mallett. Welcome to the programme, Charles.
Thank you, Mike.
And joining us via live link is journalist and peace campaigner Vanessa Beeley. Later in the programme, I'm going to be covering the latest on the regime change operation against Venezuela. Charles will be reporting on the new digital ID for veterans and also on the de-prescription of the terrorist organisation currently occupying Syria. And Vanessa is going to have the latest from Lebanon, but we're going to begin with Gaza because, well, apparently, surprise, surprise, Israel has started bombing again, Vanessa.
Yep, the so-called ceasefire didn't really last very long, not that we honestly expected it to. And we need to remember this is not Trump's peace scam. This is only a ceasefire that we're monitoring. At the moment, the Israeli forces have withdrawn to what is known as the Yellow Line, which is the first step of the withdrawal from Gaza. But of course, what are they doing? If we have a look at the map of Gaza, you can see that they're still occupying something like 58% of the Gaza Strip. So that means that effectively around 2 million of the Palestinian population, although of course numbers of dead are rising rapidly, and there are reports of around 500,000 having been killed to date, you will see that those people are being pushed into an ever-decreasing area of land. And when we talk about the staggered withdrawal, if we look at the next map, you can see that the yellow line is supposed to be the first withdrawal point, but you can also see that the red dots are the bases or the dig-ins that the Israeli forces have already started putting in place there. And also worth pointing out that the extremist factions that are very much affiliated to ISIS, that are being backed by Israel and Netanyahu to lead attacks against Hamas inside Gaza, are being sheltered within that section that is still under the control of the Israeli forces. And I have to say, I think around 9 p.m. last night, the reports of massive US-Israeli bombing started coming in. At the same time, Trump is putting out statements such as this one on the basis of an Israeli report that the reason for the bombing is that there was an Israeli reservist soldier killed by Hamas in the yellow zone. So what is Trump saying? He's saying Hamas is a very small part of peace in the Middle East, and they have to behave. Not that the Israelis have to behave, of course. If they are good, they're going to be happy. If they're not good, they're going to be terminated. Their lives will be terminated. So again, we see the usual reset position of the United States in support of anything that Israel does, even if it's basically continuing the genocide unimpeded. Marco Rubio came out pretty much with the same thing a couple of days ago, says that Israeli airstrike in Gaza is not a violation of the ceasefire. Of course, total hypocrisy here. And then if we actually have a look at what has been happening since 9 p.m. last night, as I said, I noted it beginning around 9 p.m. I woke up multiple times during the night and it was still ongoing, and it's still ongoing now. So this is from the 28th to the 29th of October, massive US-Israel strikes in Gaza, over 100 injured, 46 confirmed deaths. That's now up to around 100 with the ongoing bombing. Many children, I think up to 20 children, have been killed in these attacks. Entire families have been wiped out. Very important. This is always part of the Israeli genocidal tactic in Gaza. Targeted densely populated areas, tent camps, sheltering internally displaced civilians and children. More apartment blocks were destroyed, killing anyone still inside. And strikes across central Gaza are still ongoing as I'm speaking now. Now, among the victims, I'm not going to show many of the awful videos that are, as always, coming out of Gaza, but just to put some human face on the massacre that Israel is perpetrating still, both in West Bank and in Gaza. These are the twins, Sham and Yahya Amin Abu Dal, and in fact their entire family were wiped out. Their parents and the rest of their family were wiped out in one strike. And yet again, another journalist was also murdered in the latest strikes. This is journalist Mohammed al-Manirawi, who worked for Palestine News. He and his wife and members of his family were killed in one strike. Now, very recently, Peter Oborne, who's a British journalist who, in my opinion, was one of the few that did a decent job alongside Robert Fisk in his Syria reporting during the regime change war that began in 2011, particularly when he went to Aleppo, when really Western media was running a criminal campaign to demonize President Assad and the Syrian army. Peter Oborne went to Aleppo and came back and was heavily smeared, actually, for his reporting on what was really happening in Aleppo. He's now published a book called Complicit. You will find the link to that in the show notes, in which he accuses the British government of being complicit with genocide. And this is an interview on Channel 4 with the former ambassador to Yemen, although, as he points out, he was based in Saudi Arabia that was bombing Yemen. He wasn't actually in Yemen. Edmund Fitton Brown. And this is Peter Oborne basically taking the British government to task for their involvement in genocide, both in Yemen and in Gaza. And please listen to Fitton Brown's response to it.
And when you were ambassador, I dare say you were in Riyadh.
No, I was in Jeddah.
Jeddah. I saw a humanitarian catastrophe visited on Yemen by, again, British-backed bombing. I saw the bombing of hospitals. I saw the slaughter of civilians. There you are in Jeddah. And I also, because I'm in part of an investigative journalist, I learned of the deep concern inside the Foreign Office, then as now, that the Britain was party to war crimes. What is your position? You have a record here of supporting the mass slaughter of Arabs. And you did this in Yemen as British. I'm sorry, it's a very serious matter. It isn't something you should laugh about.
No, it's a laughable accusation.
It is the slaughter of Arabs in the Yemen, and now the slaughter of Arabs in Gaza. These are two, you have defended British government policies in each case. And I find it very troubling and morally wrong and morally atrocious and deeply shaming for our country that we should support that kind of conduct.
I highly recommend watching the whole interview. I have to say that Fitton Brown represents the really unpleasant face of British Orientalism and neocolonialism throughout the entire interview. But I just wanted to play one last excerpt from the interview where basically Fitton Brown is supporting the concept or the narrative that Iran is the next enemy for the UK. So let's just play this one second.
As well. The Houthis are obstructing commerce in the Red Sea. Iran has been a consistent enemy of the United Kingdom, has been conspiring to murder a British author over decades, and has been trying to kill people on the streets of the United Kingdom. The Israelis provide preventive intelligence that has enabled us to stop some of those plots from going ahead.
I would simply say here, the Israelis also carried out a number of illegal assassinations. The attack on Iran, which they brought the United States in, was illegal. There haven't been proper provocation from Iran.
I mean, this is just extraordinary. I mean, Iran threatening to kill people on British streets. Mike, wondering what your comment is on that.
Yes, I think we'll talk about that more in extra. I just wanted to ask you one question, Vanessa, and that was, you talked about US and Israel strikes. What is the United States' role in what's happening today and yesterday?
Well, I mean, they're supplying the bombs.
Yeah.
So I think really they're probably the most complicit in this. But of course, the UK is providing the surveillance. Yes. So between them, they are leading this campaign against the Palestinians.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, any comments?
Well, I think I've saved for extra, but there is a lot to say about it, Vanessa. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, let's move on to Venezuela then. And in recent weeks, the United States has been making clear that it intends to launch a new regime change operation in Venezuela. So if you just put the map on screen here, you'll just to make sure everybody knows where it is. Now, I appreciate Vanessa covered some of this last week, but I think it's worth just having a look again at what's been going on over the last several weeks. Because earlier this month, the United States began bombing boats claimed to be involved in Venezuelan drug running. Now, the sixth attack, as was being reported in USNI News, talks about drug smuggling semi-submersible, and for the first time since these operations began, the US Navy said at that time that it had captured 2 survivors out of 4 people who were said to be on board that boat. Reuters claimed the exclusive here on the survivors' story, and then subsequently one of the survivors was apparently released. We'll come on to that a little bit later. Then the flights of B-52s over the Caribbean began on Wednesday, October the 15th, in what was clearly a big show intended to panic Venezuelans. The Pentagon released a bunch of photographs for propaganda purposes, and this opportunity was grasped with both hands by the likes of ArmyRecognition.com that we just saw a second ago on screen. And they said, the Pentagon said, a U.S. Air Force B-52H Stratofortress bomber assigned to the 2nd Bomb Wing integrates with 2 U.S. Marine Corps F-35B Lightning II aircraft in the U.S. Southern Command Area of Responsibility on October the 15th, 2025. So that was one of the picture captions. And then each of the picture captions included a statement saying, bomber attack demonstrations contributed to the collective defense of the Western Hemisphere and demonstrated the U.S. commitment to the safety and security of the region. So that should make everybody here in Britain and Europe and in the United States feel a lot better. But here in Britain, we weren't immune from the propaganda for regime change, as highlighted here in the Daily Mail. This was Trump deploys secretive Night Stalkers regiment as Venezuela mobilizes millions of troops raising fears of all-out war was their propaganda take. And then Trump announced on his Truth Social account 10 days ago that his interest isn't just Venezuela, it's also Colombia, because of course the narrative about this is that it's all about drugs and narco states, and this is really the resurgence of the war on drugs narrative and so on as an excuse for regime change. Meanwhile, on the 17th of October, NPR here reporting that Senator Tim Kaine was planning to force a second vote. There had been an attempt to get a first vote in the Senate under the War Powers Act to block Trump from attacking Venezuela. The previous week, he and Adam Schiff had forced a Senate vote to limit Trump's war powers, and that vote failed by 48 votes to 51. And 2 Republicans took part in that. It was mostly a Democrat thing, but 2 Republicans took part. That was Rand Paul and Senator Lisa Murkowski. So they were supporting that idea. For the second vote, Kaine was joined by Rand Paul as co-sponsor, and Rand Paul said the American people do not want to be dragged into endless war with Venezuela without public debate or a vote. We ought to defend what the Constitution demands, deliberation before war. And then a few days later, Adam Smith, Representative Adam Smith, who's the top Democrat in the House Armed Services Committee, he called for hearings on the Trump regime's bombing of these so-called drug trafficking boats off the coast of Venezuela. So the political machinations continue quite ineffectually so far. Military.com published an article on the 20th, which says that while the Venezuelan military couldn't match the United States military in firepower, it's still a major threat, with 21 Russian-made Sukhoi 30 Mark II jet fighters delivered in 2008 and 2009 and armed with Kh-31 anti-ship missiles. And they also talk about the Venezuelan military having positioned older air defense systems, but these could still present problems for low-flying aircraft, especially helicopters. Now, since then, there have been further repeated overflights by the US bombers as the psychological war continues. So this is a UK Defence Journal talking about this a few days ago. And Trump says, though, that he will not be going to Congress to seek authorization for his military campaign. I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war, he said, according to the New York Times here. I think we're going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country, okay? We're going to kill them, they're going to be like dead. Lovely.
Yeah.
That's very similar in style of narrative to what Vanessa was reporting a couple of seconds ago. Now, 5 days ago, then, Secretary for War Pete Hegseth posted this to his X account, saying that overnight, at the direction of President Trump, the Department of War carried out a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel operated by a designated terrorist organization trafficking narcotics in the Caribbean Sea. 6 people were killed. But he went on to say this, which I thought was quite hilarious. He said, if you're a narco-terrorist smuggling drugs in our hemisphere, we'll treat you like Al-Qaeda. And Vanessa, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that comment, because this is a very interesting statement for Hegseth to make. Since just like Al-Qaeda, the drug cartels have had the full support of successful US regimes, with the CIA being fully engaged in the drug running, using drug money to fund black operations. And this is very similar to what's been going on with Al-Qaeda, of course, over the last number of years.
Fascinating from 3 aspects, really, because they're going to treat them like they treat Al-Qaeda. Does that mean with kid gloves and a red carpet, and take the bounty off their head and welcome them back into the fold of the international community that is led by the United States? If they're going to kill the people that are responsible for the drug smuggling, they better start back at home with the CIA, aka the cartel of the Suns that was run by the CIA, and is now being sort of used to target Maduro. But also funny how the Captagon trade in Syria has increased exponentially since Assad left, whereas previously, of course, Assad was described as the head of a narco state and a drug lord. So yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing tragicomedy that is produced entirely by the United States and the CIA.
Absolutely. Now, the war of words continues, with Congress apparently unable to do anything to stop events. So Rand Paul again talking about extrajudicial killings, but it's not really having much bite yet. So we'll see whether they can actually get any momentum behind this. And now the United States has sent an aircraft carrier to the region with threats to bomb alleged drug cartel targets within Venezuela itself, as Vanessa just mentioned. Now, as a result of the USS Gravely docking at the port of Spain in Trinidad, Venezuela has suspended energy agreements that it had with Trinidad and Tobago over what officials have described as hostile actions by Trinidad. And Trinidad not terribly impressed with that situation. I see that they may feel that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that they're probably equally concerned about what the United States is capable of at this point. But anyway, that we can discuss later whether there's any excuse for that. But then late yesterday, the news broke via Associated Press that the Trump regime attempted to bribe Maduro's, that's the Venezuelan president's pilot, to fly Maduro to a suitable location for the United States to arrest him on drug trafficking charges. And just to quote the article here, it says, the untold saga of how the agent tried to flip the pilot has all the elements of a Cold War spy thriller: luxury private jets, a secret meeting at an airport hangar, high-stakes diplomacy, and the delicate wooing of a key Maduro lieutenant. There was even a final act of intrigue aimed at rattling the Venezuelan president about the pilot's true loyalties. So the question is, why is this happening? Well, Afshin Rattansi offers a suggestion in this post on X. Now, let's just have a look at a video he attached to this post on X. It's a comment from former US Ambassador James Story.
This is a very bad actor sitting on top of the world's largest known reserves of oil, plus the critical minerals that will fuel the 21st century economy, and he's in bed with our strategic competitors.
So that seems to be the position of the United States anyway, and perhaps we're getting a bit closer to the truth there. Now, tomorrow at 1 p.m., I'm going to be speaking to Jose Biamorgi, who is the Venezuelan ambassador to Lebanon and Syria. And we're going to be talking about US actions against Venezuela, and he certainly has quite a bit more to say on why that particular action is being taken. But clearly, regime change is what it's all about. And perhaps, Vanessa, just very briefly, perhaps oil, rare earths, and other raw materials may be part of it. But perhaps the fact that Chavez and Maduro are not supporting the drugs trade in the way that previous Venezuelan governments did, it may be part of it as well.
Yeah, and also Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, who has made a statement that he would support Venezuela militarily if the US does invade or declare war. But also it's Venezuela's connection to the resistance axis, to Iran, to Hezbollah, formerly to Syria, as you mentioned, Yemen and Iraq. That's also another important reason for any kind of destabilization of Venezuela.
Yes, thank you. Charles.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, Hexeth there. I mean, peace through strength seems to be sort of last week's news, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but conflict there between what Palestine Action have done in the form of criminal damage and what HTS have been doing.
Well, in fact, I think the first case for the Fulton 24, the first three that were actually put before a judge, their sentence was reduced from criminal damage to I think just, I can't remember what it was reduced to. And yet this group is prescribed terrorist. But I also want to make the point that Hamas and Hezbollah are prescribed terrorist groups in the UK. They are not a threat to UK national security. They're a threat to Israeli national security. You've now deprescribed Al-Qaeda, effectively, HTS, that is conducting genocidal ethnic cleansing in Syria of minorities, including Christians, that is backed by Israel and has a very high probability of being a threat to the UK population when particularly British jihadists belonging to Al-Qaeda return to the UK. So yet again, Israeli national security is being prioritized over British national security.
Let's come back to you. And what's the latest in Lebanon?
Well, I mean, in Lebanon, we're seeing a ramping up of Trump's administration bully boy tactics. I don't know any other way to describe how Trump enacts his foreign policy globally. Recently, well, in fact, yesterday and today, yesterday it was one of the US envoys arrived in Lebanon. And today, Tom Barrack, Trump's economic hitman, as I describe him, is going to be in Lebanon. And he basically put out a statement, I think it was yesterday. US envoy warns Lebanon that they have one last chance to disarm Hezbollah and, of course, the Lebanese resistance, which doesn't only consist of Hezbollah. His full statement, so basically he said, I will inform the president, the prime minister, and the speaker of parliament that they have one last chance. He then went on in his basically what is a threat to the Lebanese people. Either they learn their lesson and decide to enter into direct negotiations with Israel under US auspices to establish a timetable and mechanism for disarming Hezbollah, or Lebanon will be left to its fate and will remain so for a long time with no one to care about it, neither in America nor in the region. And no one will be able to pressure Israel to prevent it from doing whatever it deems appropriate to undertake disarmament by force. This is quite an extraordinary statement. He's not mentioned the fact that Israel is still occupying Lebanese territory and is increasing its occupation of Lebanese territory. Today, an attack by the Israeli forces inside Lebanon was carried out on a Lebanese army vehicle, not a Hezbollah resistance vehicle, but actually the official Lebanese army. Bombing and suicide drone attacks have been increasing in the last week, and none of this is mentioned by Barrack. In fact, what he actually does is abrogate responsibility for Israel's action and basically withdraws the US from the negotiations and Saudi Arabia from the financing of the essential reconstruction of civilian infrastructure destroyed by Israel in the last war, and basically leaves the field open for Israel to do whatever it wants. So in other words, just as the British withdrew actually from the occupied territories of Palestine and left it to Israel to ethnically cleanse Palestinians in 1948 with the UN support. Right now, the US is doing exactly the same thing and saying to Israel, go ahead, disarm Hezbollah and bomb the south. And in fact, that is very much what has been happening. This is just a very short video from an area known as Baalbek, where you have some of the most historic heritage Roman ruins in the region. And just to show on the map itself where that is, because it's not in the south, it's actually very much in the eastern sector on the border with Syria. Sorry, the cat's getting in on the act. So basically, Israel is increasing the field of its attacks in Lebanon, just as, of course, Barrack has given them green light to do so. In the last few days, there has been a strike on a number of cars traveling in the south, and these strikes are on a daily, if not 2 or 3 times daily basis. In the image, you can see basically what happens when these drone strikes occur. They just basically take out the car, anyone close to the car, anyone traveling next to the car, and all the people in the car are, of course, simply obliterated. And on the left is a young man who was killed in this way in the last couple of days, Issa Karbala, who was basically assassinated by an Israeli drone, of course, violating the ceasefire, which has been violated around now, I think, 6,000 times by Israel. And I think a very important factor in this, and something that I was reflecting on, having had a discussion with journalist Marwa Osman, who, of course, is Lebanese, last night, over how these policies are really affecting the human beings in this region. And it's very difficult to convey the psychological warfare that is being waged against these people on an almost daily basis. This is something that she posted this morning following our long and detailed conversation last night, and the whole post is in the show notes. But she basically says, there are days when grief feels heavier than the sky, when silence echoes louder than any bomb, and you start to wonder if the heart can actually break twice in the same place. People here are absolutely torn apart by what is happening. Everyone has lost people, family members, friends, relatives in this war, and very much they are being ignored very much by Western media, by Western regimes that are complicit in the ongoing aggression by Israel against this region. But one point that she made at the end, and I think this is where you get the connection across all borders, from the West to the East to West Asia, that we're all fighting the same enemy. So she says, if you still ache at injustice, if you still feel love burning under the ashes, then you're not defeated. You are alive. And that in itself is resistance. And I think it's a powerful message that even those that are suffering really the most in West Asia, from Yemen to Gaza, are still able to understand the concept of resistance. And I think in the West, we have a lot to learn from this, that all the sacrifices that have to be made to actually defeat the enemy ultimately are worth it when you can feel that you have upheld your human values and what it means to be human today. And that, of course, is what is being attempted to be eroded by those that are enabling what is happening in this region.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing that we could say about that, Vanessa, is if we're looking for inspiration for resistance, it's the longevity and the determination over an extended period of time to resist. It's not something that they can solve in 6 months or a year. It's something that takes years, and they're not running away from the fight.
No, and it doesn't mean that there aren't moments of defeatism or a drop in morale or even depression, psychological trauma. That exists. But ultimately, at the core is this refusal to be dehumanized, to be othered, to be wiped out or exterminated.
Yeah.
I think it's a very, very good point, and it should be considered in the face of all of the various things that we talk about. I mean, even though there is obviously a scale of how much sort of trauma people are actually subjected to, but absolutely, Vanessa, I think humanity is the main thing to consider.